Because you clicked on this video, I would have to assume that you're curious about how to get what you want quicker. You knowing that there's no time per se as an absolute ultimate, but in our material experience, you're wondering, why don't I have what I want? And the assumption being that, because if you had what you wanted, you wouldn't be searching for more information because you would understand that you are the information. You're everything that you see. You're the generator, you're the operator, you're the destroyer, you are God, you're an individualized expression of it, at least, God of your reality. But you're here and you're wondering, well, what is it that I'm missing? Because I'm not experiencing my higher vision. I'm not experiencing my heaven on earth. I feel as though I'm separated from things, that you've even summoned me to co-create this moment with you here on Divine Within to discuss the power within, the reality within, and the kingdom within. And being in clinical practice 7 years, there's a psychological correlation to the spiritual aspect that one can keep people in therapy for years, but also two, along the same lines, in a different, with a different lens, is why you're having, I won't say trouble, but you're still suffering under the illusion that you do not have what you want. And there's a common link there, and it's the thing that we all, on a human level, common parlance, if we're neglecting the fact that we're souls having a human experience, looking at the human experience side of things, that side of secular / Christianity that thinks, no, we're humans who have a soul. We're souls, know, that have a human suit. But when you're talking to just people in, a general standard way, that've been indoctrinated with the general standard conditioning that we are humans who have a soul or have some type of touch or connection with the Holy Spirit, most of them will tell you, yes, they want to go to heaven, but two, they're afraid to die. And therein lies the exact problem. And I see it across spectrums, across practices, at least practices that I'm engaged in, again, from the humanities to psychologies to philosophies to coaching practices to the metaphysical to the spiritual, and all of these different subsets of really truly the same study of ascension. What I see is a person's ability to let go of who they think they are. So what we're talking about is self-concept and identity. And I don't mean like let go in an airy fairy way, like I'm just telling you to let go. You're going to have to feel this transmission more than you hear it logically, because I'm not talking about a logical set of steps. Of course, like I'm a coach, I can give you a logical set of steps of how to let go. David R. Hawkins, read Letting Go. Like there's a million processes for what it means to let go. And there's the anti-process of just stop holding on to it. Allow it to flow through you. This transmission is not necessarily so much on how to let go, but the importance of death itself. Most people, again, just in a common, indoctrinated, standardized, hegemonic, patriarchal, United States, Western colonized version of the narrative that you're supposed to believe, that I'm going to heaven if I do good, but I also am afraid to leave this flesh plane. But at the same time, I'm going to treat my body like shit and eat the worst foods, eat dead flesh to substantiate my physical being, have all these health issues, around 70 to 80, fear death, hold on, get dementia, hang on for 10 more years, stay in a home, then I'll die, hopefully I go to heaven. That's what they tell you you're supposed to believe. Or I don't know, I think I've just probably seen that version of reality too much. Obviously, it was specific in how I was naming it out. But that's what you're taught. But what I'm saying is that this cultural narrative that death is bad, that death is something to be feared, it has far greater implications than just what's going to happen at the end of life. It is a fear of endings themselves. And you cannot, when I very first got into the manifest, and I've always been very spiritual, even as I went to seminary for 2 years, so I was really even trying to find the truths in the institution, going to institutional, being a part of the institution and pursuing that at a graduate level. But I was always interested in what was underneath. Later on, I'm into my mid-20s, and I get turned on to this material that's, and there's all this stuff coming from all these different ways when you first just start finding out about the different laws of the universe. And it was this one woman talking about, it was really more of an anecdotal experience, but she did have it based on, I don't know, Florence Scovel Shinn or something like that. But basically how everything in her life had to come crumbling apart in order for the newness of the higher vision that she was calling in order for that to have space in her life. And I took that at first as, so I can't, if I'm trying to manifest a new friend, if I'm trying to manifest loving friends and I already have a friend group, those friends have to go in order for me to get my manifestation. I was like, that math doesn't make sense. Like that sounds like very humanized conditional math. So I didn't understand that. But now, in having, several years later, having experienced a lot more of life with that same information in mind, now I understand is that you have to manifest all that your higher vision, to manifest your higher vision. And that's different for everyone, and it never ends. It never ends. You can continue walking up the ladder and elevating in the frequencies, and life can just keep getting better and better and better. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no challenge or struggle, but it does mean that that challenge and struggle does not become your state of being, that they are passing items in the illusion of the 3D, and you continue ascending with that knowing. So that doesn't necessarily ever end. But in order to manifest your higher vision and your heaven on earth, as you would define that, then you have to be proficient at letting go of versions that are connected to different frequential realities that are yielding a certain amount of outcome. So it's essentially always shedding versions of yourself. And I identify with the archetype of the serpent. So I'm the snake here telling you my gift and my trade. And I think all of the animals have different gifts and trades. I mean, you're looking at the infinite expressions of God. There is nothing here that you can't integrate that won't make you a more expanded version of yourself. Because when I talk about divinity, when I'm talking about God, what I'm referring to is wholeness. And that everything here is a piece of the same puzzle that, if put together, will make a coherent picture. So the all is contained in the fragment, and the fragment within the fragment contains the all. It's all one thing. So we can learn something from the bear, from the eagle, from the fox. I'm the serpent here telling you have to be proficient at shedding layers all the time, because so I kind of set that context up of what I was saying is, like, we're taught to fear death. We don't even really know why we fear death. Why would you fear something if you don't know what's going to happen next? Now, I understand the logical answer there is, like, it's exactly that. It's a fear of it's uncertainty that is creating that fear. But how could you be afraid of something you haven't experienced? Like, that doesn't actually make sense. That's actually just you inserting some type of something that is predictive and based on the past and imposing it on a future that you can't actually define, and that also is not happening. So when we fear the unknown, what we fear is really being in that place that is unexplained to us, that we don't have a pre-existing narrative for. So we're afraid, we're taught to be. You even just hear people, I'm afraid to die, and it's implicit messages and it's explicit messages about this fear of death. They, whatever they is, and that could be anything from just maybe the more adversarial forces within your own self is really more what I'm referring to. But of course, they're, I don't really believe in outside imposition, but I believe that we can perceive of the illusion of a kind of adversary on the outside that is really just reflecting something that's more within. But they are, I won't even say the darkness within, because the darkness is not necessarily a bad thing, but the forces within you that are working against the lower entities and versions of self that are working against your ascension, which I do believe exist, that are working against your ascension, not because they're evil, but because it's in their better interest to continue existing if you are on the awareness of the level and the plane or in the version of reality that they exist. Like, if you're used to, for instance, a pattern of relationships that lead you to feel depleted in whatever way, whether you're doing the using or whether you're the used. I'm not even talking about the sides of morality there. If you're used to that pattern of relationship, and that's what's been carrying through what we can understand as 2 points, 2 distances of measurement called time, and that's been carrying on for what appears to be, what is sensed as a long period of time, that version of self is going to become a kind of entity that is interested in its own self-survival. So as you decide that I'm going to ascend past the version of myself that in one way or another is doing the using or being the used, which oftentimes you are doing both, and I'm going to start establishing a certain type of sovereignty within myself, man, I won't be damned if you don't start getting friends left and right, if people don't start trying to date you, if there's not a million then distractions that it seems are trying to maybe pull you back into that version of self that was dependent upon other people in order to validate its reason for existence. So there's going to be this particular type of pattern and this type of rhythm carrying out that is going to be a version of yourself that you are quite familiar with. If you're not willing to end that, I'm saying execute that version of self ruthlessly, you will continually be caught in the pattern of reliving the same things. But again, we're taught to fear death. And what I mean by that is, I'm not, that first of all, if we break that down, that doesn't even really make sense, because what are we actually afraid of? Nobody can actually even tell you. They'll say, I don't know. And it's like, well, why are you afraid of what you don't know? But the implicit message that death is a bad thing. Or for instance, at least here in the Midwest, it seems that people are against nature. And what I mean by that is they complain when it's hot. They complain when it's cold. They only like fall. You know, you have all these people around here talking about pumpkin. I hate to be stereotypical still. I sound like, you know, some angry meme from 2016, but talking about pumpkin spice and sweaters and Thanksgiving photos. But yet, if it's not exactly 75 degrees the entire duration of what we're supposed to call fall, then it's still too hot or too cold. You know, we go outside and we yell about the very existence of nature being nature. We can't accept it. And then when it's cold, oh, now we have to stay in. Oh, now I don't have my community. Oh, God, now everything's is so bad. I have to figure out what to do with myself inside of the house. Oh, God. And that goes on. Then spring is too cold or too hot, at least again here in the Midwest. But what I'm saying here is that we're against flow and rhythm. We're against flow. Like, we don't accept it like, okay, it's December. You've lived here for 54 years. I would think in 54 winters of you living in this same place, you would understand that yes, it is cold. In 54 years, you have not had any level of pattern recognition that tells you this is a season for coming back to the self. This is not a season largely apart from the various different kind of solstice related holidays, you know, Christmas and the likes, Kwanzaa, and all that other stuff. Apart from those gatherings, which were intended to be a break, you know, in the loneliness, and I won't say loneliness, but in the solitude and in the coming into oneself that winter asks of us. In 54 years, you've never picked up that perhaps there's an intent behind that. No, we just complain about it. So we're not looking outside of us to, and when I say outside of us, I don't mean basing your sense of perception on external appearances of truth. What I mean is like to just observe nature in the way. And I know different parts of the, that's why I said I localized myself, because maybe all of what I just said doesn't apply to New Hampshire or California. I don't know. I imagine there's still some version of that, you know, but we don't look outside of us and say that everything seems to be in rhythm, seems to be in flux, seems to be in change, seems to be in flow. And the more that I surrender myself to the things that, you know, I cannot control, a serenity prayer, the more that I submit myself to those things, the greater power I have, because my energy is not resourced to the resistance of things that are not actually against me. Spring is indeed a different season than winter, and they can bring you different gifts. But if you're insistent that it be 75 degrees year round, perfectly partially overcast with a slight breeze, enough for you to decide, do you want to wear shorts? Do you want to wear your Fabletics freaking whatever sweatpants? Should I wear a quarter zip, or is it nice enough for just a t-shirt? If you insist that 365 days, that's going to be your experience, then of course you're miserable and of course you're fucked up. On the therapeutic ends of what I have experience in clinically, what I can see is that now they're seeing me for a totally different purpose, but the principles operate the same. Depends on, I can translate the same principles into different languages, but we're still talking about the same thing because it's all one thing. It's as though people, what most of the work I'm doing with them is not even really processing their emotions. Like, yeah, it seems to be that. It's not even, it's not the aspect of care that I think proliferates healing in the experience of the other person, which has nothing to do with me, is not dependent on the method. It is slightly dependent upon, maybe more so than other factors, their reception of me and my communication style, and how they feel in the field of that which is my office. But most importantly, above all of that, what determines how that person is going to do, whether they'll be with me for 3 months and everything's turned around, or whether they're with me 3 years or an even extended period of time, has largely to do with how easily they can cut themselves off from painful identities and painful experiences of that which seems to be the past. There was another creator that just made a video, and she just said plainly that no one is real, nothing's here. I really like her stuff. It's Beyond Taylor. You can look her up. And there are people in her comments that she's a non-dual. I mean, I'm not going to say, oh, what her work is, but from what I receive of it, it's a lot of non-duality. So, everything is one thing, which means everything is no thing, that the absolute is nothingness, that everything you see is appearing from where, and who is the one doing the seeing. So to follow that all up with no one is real, not even you, it shouldn't be a wild, ludicrous statement, but people were responding in the comments essentially saying, yes, but I've had and I see this in counseling all day. Yes, but I've had all of these experiences, and they're very painful. And I do believe, absolutely not believe, I know there's the appearance, I know that there are experiences of victimization, but when victimization becomes victimhood, meaning when a victimizing experience, and labeling it that way, occurs to you, that is a different thing than I am a victim. That is you casting the shadow of the frequency and the vibration of that event over your life and saying, this is all I am. And that's not the case for any moment, good or bad. Good or bad, should you need to localize things in polarities that way. So we hold on to, yeah, but I was this when I was 5 years old, and you can't take that away from me. You can't say that nothing is real, and this happened, and I have to move past it. But the reality in which you have to move past something is continuing to validate its existence, which means all you've done is create a more comfortable version of that same prison as the idea of yourself, rather than moving to a version of yourself that doesn't identify with the reality of that experience. So yes, we could be talking about a kind of revision here, but that's still a little too deeper in terms of method. I'm talking about just the very idea. When you can allow a version of yourself to die, you can move forward to the next. I'm not talking about rapidly cutting off people or draining your 401k and moving to wherever people move to that you think are successful. I'm not saying making rash, because this is not about, very few things that I say have to do with you physically going out and doing something. And for more clarity on where the source of these transmissions, check out, they have it on our source codex, which is available to you for free and is in the show notes. That's the system of reality creation that, again, colors the lens of every word that I have to say. And I occasionally update it as I expand my understanding of these themes. And my understanding may not be yours, but I'm offering it to you, and you do with it what you please. But not as a framework of how to let things go, not what to do, but understanding that I might have been through something horrific. What is it within me that is causing me to need to hold on to that as my understanding of self? A lot of the work I do with people most of the time, and depending on, obviously every single case is different, but it's to stop identifying as the person that has that disease experience. And again, I translate it into evidence-based psychological language, but I'm doing the same thing. I can make a video and just tell you to stop saying that about yourself. Stop believing I'm a person struggling with anxiety. Because the person that identifies as struggling with anxiety, the best thing they can be is someone who copes with their struggle with anxiety, which we're all at different levels. And there are a lot of individuals that are at that level of awareness, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with where you're at. I'm just saying that there is a place beyond. There is a place beyond you struggling. There's a place beyond you having to manage the effects of. There's a place beyond having to move on from. There's a place beyond having to heal from. There's a place beyond having to let go. You don't have to identify with those experiences that you say you need to let go of. You don't have to continue being that version of yourself, but because we're indoctrinated with this idea that death is bad, which really means that loss is bad, it creates this imperative within us to hold on to everything, thinking that if I don't hold on to this pain, then who am I? And I say, exactly. Well, if I don't know who I am, then I'll be afraid. Afraid of what? I'll be afraid that I don't know. Well, does that really make any sense? How could you be afraid of what you don't know? So that would tell me that this fear is based on something else, which again is something else that you already know. It is not truly the unknown. So we're still not actually afraid of the unknown. Because it is precisely where you will find and understand with Gnosis your own path when you let go of these constructs of who you were taught you're supposed to be. And I'm mostly speaking in negative context. You taught that you were supposed to be based on identifying with experiences you had. Now, no matter how painful, we're still momentary because we're here now and those things are not happening, which sounds invalidating. I'm in a therapeutic space and I have to spend 3 months translating this language into something that sounds compassionate when really what we're talking about is ruthlessness. What we're talking about is to stop feeding attention to those versions of self that are even dealing with those issues. So you get the straight cut. It'll save you thousands of dollars because you already have the answer within you. You're an individualized expression of all of it. Nobody needs to tell you. I'm helping you remember. I'm helping you, flash the lights on, but you got to keep them on. Nobody needs to heal you. Why do you think you need to be healed? So, there's a honk outside. I was like, the ancestors approve. Okay. Signing off of this transmission of Divine Within. I am an entity named Lucian. And I thank you for co-creating this moment here with me. There are resources down below for further insight, further contact with me, the written word, podcast, one-on-one. That's there. Remember to be good to yourselves and others because everybody's just a version of you anyway.